All right, class, in this little mini lesson, we're going to review what you should know about quadratic equations. Really, you should have known this for pre-calculus, to be honest, but I'm just going to make sure we understand that this is what the expectation is. All right, so a quadratic equation, of course, is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Quadratic meaning the x squared term. So basically, you need to know how to factor. So one like this is one that's easily factored. The way I like to read it backwards is I'm looking for factors of 15 that are different by 2. That would be 5 and 3. 5 being the big one gets the minus sign. And then, of course, we know that we don't have to say anything else other than what the answers are. X would equal 5 and negative 3. Okay. You should also know difference of fancy stuff like difference of squares. So I want to bring this one up specifically for a reason. So you should know that that factors into x minus 8, x plus 8. And then let me say that you might want to do that. So some of you might be thinking, well, can I do the square root thing? Yeah. You can take the square root of both sides with the understanding that you know there's supposed to be two different answers. So when you write your answer down, you don't say 8, you say plus or minus 8. That's because the square root of x squared is actually the absolute value of x, and that's why we have to say plus or minus. So once again, these answers should be the same for both of them, 8 and negative 8. Okay, what happens if you have one that's not a monic polynomial? So one like this, 6x squared minus x minus 12 equals 0. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of different ways to do this. One way that I learned way back in the day was the box thing. So you actually have to take the 6 and the 12 and multiply it together. So you're looking for factors of 72. So instead of reading this number, you read this one. So 72 different by 1. Okay, and the way I like to do that is I put my 6x squared in the top left corner of the box. I put a 12 down here. I don't put signs when I'm doing this. I deal with that later. Factors of 72 that are different by 1 would be 8 and 9. So one of these is an 8x and the other is a 9x. Okay, and then you just find the greatest common factors of all of these terms. So the greatest common factor of 3x squared and 9x would be, 6x squared would be 3x. The greatest common factor of 8x and 12 would be 4. The greatest common factor of 6x squared and 8x would be 2x. The greatest common factor of 9x and 12 would be 3. So at this point we know our terms are 2x, 3, and 3x, 4. And then to figure out the signs, we know that they're different signs, and we know that the biggest one of the two middle terms is a negative. So if I'm looking at the middle terms, I have 8 from those two, from the outer, and 9 from the inner. 9 is bigger than 8, so 9 gets the minus sign. So the way we have to put it is we have to put it right there with that minus 3, and the other one gets a plus sign. And then we can just write our answers. X equals 3 halves, and x equals negative 4 thirds. Okay, and then lastly, what happens if we have an equation that doesn't factor? Alright, so you can try to find factors of 17 that add up to 8, but that's just not going to happen. So the only factors of 17 are 1 and 17. So, you need to know the quadratic formula. I'm going to write it down here one time, and probably never ever again will you see it written in your class, because it's something that you're supposed to know. And don't start singing some silly song, okay? You're just supposed to know it. Alright, so there's the quadratic formula, where we're looking at the a is 1, the b is minus 8, and the c is 17. So if we just, the nice thing about the quadratic formula is that it's arithmetic, okay? So this would be 8 plus or minus 8 squared is 64. Remember, that's always positive, even if the b is a negative term, because you're squaring it. And then minus 4 times 17 times 1 is 68. And all that's over 2 times 1, which is 2. And that's going to give you negative 4. So here I'll just sort of simplify this out over here. So this is 8 plus or minus root negative 4 over 2. which is 8 plus or minus 2I over 2. And don't do that thing where you divide this by 2 but not the other one. Both of them have to be divided by 2. So that's going to be 4 plus or minus I. Now, just a last piece of advice for quadratic stuff. The first method you should always pick should be factoring. So you should always try to factor it. If you have difficulty factoring, so if you can't factor it in about 10 to 20 seconds, then go to the quadratic formula. That's my general rule of thumb. That's a really good way to think about how to decide whether to do it by the quadratic formula or not. It's arithmetic, but it's a little bit messy. So there you go.